Hello everyone, my name is Andrea Tedesco, AE at Cassandra.
Hi, I'm Nicholas and I'm Director of Operations and Partnerships at Cassandra.
I'm assuming you know what marketing mix modeling is and more in general, its application. But today we are going to talk about one of the most misunderstood factors in MMM, which is the baseline. Let's do a step back. How is MMM able to assess and isolate each channel's incremental contribution? Looking wholly at the spending over time, how does it know that a specific channel drove those sales? To simplify, let's assume we have only one channel, and over the last 2 years, a mathematical function analyzes each spending level and finds the appropriate relationship with your outcome. In other words, the model creates a multiplier that in our case is the ROI. So we spent X and we got Y, we spent Z and we got W. Now, why are there different multipliers at different spending levels? Just because the channels becomes more or less saturated as we scale the spend. In other words, the model creates a multiplier. So spending level times multiplier equal to incremental sales. Now, as we can see, out of 100 sales, our investment is contributing for 80. What about the remaining 20? And that's our baseline. In other words, the portion of our revenue that occurs regardless of marketing activity. How does the model calculate the baseline? Very simply, by setting the spending level to 0.
Thank you, Andrea. So now that we have a mathematical view of the baseline, let's deep dive a little bit more. So what's in that baseline? On the left-hand side of that slide, you can see all the different elements that are on that baseline. So if you start from bottom up, in the baseline, you'll find seasonality, competitive activity, and of course, purchases made by your returning or your very loyal customer. Those are always part of the baseline. What can also be in a baseline are your own price discount and promotion campaigns and all special events like PR events or event sponsorships, etc., etc., etc. Special events and price discount and promotions can be in a baseline if you don't have the discrete data points for it, or they can be taken out. Regardless of where the baseline includes those two elements, regardless of that distinction, whatever comes on top of the baseline is the incremental sales driven by a given channel. And that's how NMM are built. On the right-hand side, we're looking at relatively basic attribution models that most of the platforms are utilizing nowadays. They don't have this concept of baseline because all they do is count touch points prior to a purchase. Whether that touch point is driven by an incremental buyers or is an incremental sales is not relevant. They cannot distinguish whether this is incremental sales or simply a sales coming from returning or loyal customers or a function of seasonality, for instance. So each platform, in this example, TikTok on its own, Google on its own, Facebook Meta on its own, will simply count touch points prior to a purchase and attribute the entire purchase to one or more of those touch points when they have visibility. This is the main reason why, when you're very familiar with the traditional models, you have sometimes difficulties understanding what's the baseline. Hopefully this clarifies a lot of things and helps you understand better your MMM model output. As always, at Cassandra, we love content. We love publishing content. Feel free to scan the QR code to get to know more about everything we publish. Thank you.